Okay, guys. So I'd like to introduce to you my friend, not a spy.
Hello.
And you guys know me, I'm the alt monarchist. And so, we decided to just have a chat about Ukraine. And my friend, not a spy, he's a very well researched and experienced in a lot of geopolitical stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm kind of an amateur analyst, I guess. I mean, that's what I could have done with my worthless degree. So I studied history, geopolitics, things like that when I was in university.
What's up with Ukraine winning so greatly?
Dude, that's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. Like I one of the few things that we can generally like have a solid understanding of is you can't come to many conclusions with a conflict like this. But what we can come to the conclusion is that the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle is garbage, and everyone's known that for years. And what else? Leopards are overrated too.
Yes, I think that's been proven on the battlefield.
Mhm.
Like
And
literally, like what happened to all those leopards? They're just gone.
and that's not like a surprise because the West relies. Everybody who has talked about geopolitics and military conflict um, over the past 30 years or something like that knows that the West relies off of like a kind of mystique of like our technology is better, our technology is superior because it's Western. Um,
Mhm.
which I mean, theoretically, yes, a lot of their stuff is nicer,
Some of it, yeah,
but
yeah.
theoretically, yes. But if you have any idea how federal governments work, they're always it's not as nice as you think.
Well, especially when the government is making contracts with a bunch of private companies that kind of,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep.
like, and the government would be like, okay, well, you're too expensive, so we'll go with this cheaper choice right here. Yes, it's also billions of dollars, but it's a couple $1 billion less than you. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And that's like, I mean, unrelated to the Ukraine war, but I think whoever on earth is making the F-35, they just had to push it back another like 4 months or something like that.
Hmm.
And it's like the several time. I don't remember exactly how many because I don't really pay attention to that stuff. I'm not one of those nerds that's like, oh, this tank's better than that. This plane's better than that. But
Yeah.
um, definitely, it seems that all of the hope that the Ukrainians had on a wonderful offensive has fallen completely flat. Just
Yeah.
downright
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. Like basically the whole offensive is okay, let's go to this small town of Robotine. Let's lose thousands of soldiers. Russians, they'll have like a small, tiny group of men, like literally like a tiny portion of dudes guarding a tiny village, and Ukrainians will be like, okay, we got to break through this line, right? And so there's like 10 lines of defense, and the Ukrainians did not even make it to the first line of Russia's defense, like because that was like Russia's offensive line too. That was not even a
Yeah.
defense line. And
Yep.
so Ukrainians go into Robotine, like they first of all they barely take it, they spent like thousands and thousands of men fighting against outnumbered Russians, right?
Hmm.
Like here's the thing: Russians are not even trying that hard. They're kind of okay. Let's kind of shoot off these Ukrainians right here.
Yeah.
And then,
I
then
mean,
like then Russians say, okay, well, it's no point in trying to waste our energy here. Let's kind of fall back a bit. And
mhm.
then after Russians are gone, Ukrainians would be like, yeah, we took over this tiny village after thousands and thousands of lives lost, and that's the whole counteroffensive basically. Like,
Pretty
wait a
much.
minute, like wait a
Yeah.
minute, like where like it would make sense like if the whole front line, like if the entire front line just kind of moved in that direction, then that's
Oh,
something because at least
yeah.
like wait a whole front line. Oh wow, that's impressive,
Yeah. If
but
you shift
yeah.
a front line even a kilometer, just like half a mile or something like that, if even if you shift the whole front line a kilometer, you're not just shifting the front line, you're shifting all of the defensive positions, all of the all of the artillery measurements, all of the logistics, even. You more or less have to shift it back because you're not just moving the front line, you're moving their front line, your artillery front line, your everything, where you can launch drones from, that completely changes the entire situation. It smalls. It sounds like a small thing, but it's really not, especially in the modern conflict. You have a lot of light infantry fighting, which is exactly what military theorists like Poole, who wrote like the last 100 yards and the Tiger's Way. He's a Marine military theorist, and he pretty much predicted that warfare would become exactly this. The Russians are using an active defense. It's small emplacements along the front with static defenses behind that are entrenched. Imagine my shock. They're doing something reasonable. And the Ukrainians are breaking themselves against an active defense on the front line.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. On top of that, like, what's interesting is that, like, for some reason, I cannot see any massive mainstream Western articles talking about the Kupiansk offensive that the Russians are doing, right? Which, by the way, is an actual offensive. Like, although they're moving slowly, but you could see like the lines are shifting. So it's not like this. It's not like a
yep.
tiny village with like a few people there. It's multiple villages, and they're actually pushing in from different directions. You know, from this side right here, and they're still moving towards Kupiansk. And on top of that, they're like not far from I forgot the name of the village. I think it's Andreevka. Like, I could be
I
wrong, but
think
I think
it's
that's the name, Andreevka. And like they're getting closer to that, right? And and here's the thing though. Like, Russians don't make any big promises. They're kind of more silent about what they want to do, right? And then all of a
yeah.
sudden you have this Kupiansk offensive, which just happens out of nowhere, a month ago, and it's still progressing, right? While the Ukrainians, for the entire front line, their whole counteroffensive was barely taking Robotin, and on top of that, with major losses, major casualties. So
Yeah.
far, like the latest updates, like for the entire war, so there's like 65,000 dead Russians and 150,000 wounded Russians, right?
Mm-hmm.
While Ukrainians have 400,000 dead. Now that's 400,000 dead, and how many wounded they have is probably a lot more.
Oh, that's gotta be nasty. I'm not gonna say exactly how many I think are alive or dead. I know we have some pretty decent estimates, including that wasn't it a Pentagon leak? You remember that one
Regarding what?
regarding Russian
Bless you.
casualties? Thank you. It's pretty dry here, so I'm not used
Oh,
to that.
regarding the Ukrainian casualties?
Yeah, the one regarding the Ukrainian and Russian casualties. There's a Pentagon leak, and it said like it was a lot less Russians and a lot more
Oh, yes,
Ukrainians.
yes, yes. Yes, like I do remember that. And what's funny
Yeah,
is that, like, back like last year, I remember like last summer, they were saying, okay, 100,000 Russians dead, 500,000 Russians dead. Like,
I
what
remember
the?
hearing
Yeah,
a million. I
yeah,
remember people saying, "Well, a million are dead,"
yeah, yeah. Like
and
last
soon
summer.
they're going to cross the border. And here we are.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened.
Yeah,
Sorry,
but what's
guys.
funny is that, like, they're saying all this last summer. I'm thinking, oh
Mhm.
wow, like, I mean, I didn't believe them, but I was thinking, okay, this makes no
Oh
sense.
yeah, you would
Yeah,
be like the one of the things, and I know it's crummy, it's a really bad answer, but when people ask you if you analyze sources that you can confirm, again, that's one of the things. You have to be able to confirm sources. And Americans don't do that. They don't do that. They just believe stuff because they want to believe it. Like I remember when did America leave Afghanistan and they were like the Taliban are running from the Afghan National Army, and then 72 hours later the Taliban owned the country. Um,
yeah,
like wasn't the best look. And so they were saying all of that stuff: a million dead Russians, 10,000 destroyed tanks, whatever. And then it was just a month ago I saw from Fox News, it was like 35,000 dead Russians in total war. Russia struck horrible blow, like 35,000. That's a percentage of a percentage of a percentage
yeah,
of the Russian population. Even if
yeah,
it was 35,000, that's not that
yeah.
much.
You know what's interesting? Speaking of population, so when the war started, like, actually, no, let's go back before the war started, right?
Mhm.
um, like basically, like you have millions of Ukrainians leaving Ukraine in like 2014, 2015 because the civil war that's going on in Donbass, right? Like they were so
Mhm.
scared that Russia would just join in, so they just fled the country. But then here's the thing, millions of people would just leave the country and not go back. They'll go to Western Europe and like they'll be patriots in Western Europe. They don't want
Mhm.
to be patriots in their own country because you know
Oh yeah.
yeah, the living conditions are not so great, huh? Although
Well,
to be fair, I'll say this: you're a true patriot. Like if you stay behind in your country, and you know what, fine, you know, like you know, you just take it as it is, right? That's
Mhm.
different. Or if you leave the country just to come back, let's say you leave, you know, the motherland for like
Mhm.
10 years, but then you come back with more money so that you're able to sustain yourself in your home
Yeah.
country, and then you know you use your skills and knowledge that you learned in a foreign country and try to implement it in your home country. That's different, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But here's the thing: a lot of these Ukrainians, they're not doing this. Like they would leave the country just to never come back and just to constantly praise Ukraine overseas.
Yeah. Well, it's like
Yeah.
that old joke about where are the most what was it? Where's the most Greek nationalists and where's the most Turkish nationalists arguing at each other in Berlin? They're not even in their countries.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
You know.
what's interesting is that like that's like I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with people like from a different nationality living in a different country as long as they eventually plan to return there someday. You know,
Mhm.
like but if you're like, but if you never plan on returning, then like, dude, stop. You know, drop your patriotism right now. Like you're now a citizen of this current country now.
I
You
mean,
know, yeah.
honestly, I wouldn't even blame a Ukrainian who called themselves a patriot, who left Ukraine when this war started to not fight for their government. And I know you'll have people say they're not fighting for their government, they're fighting for their country. Whatever.
Mhm.
Nobody cares about your idealistic nonsense. Like
Yes,
at the end of the
that's
day,
part. Well, that's part of it. Like some of them just didn't just hate the Ukrainian government, so they left
mhm,
Ukraine because of
yeah,
that
and I
too.
don't blame them.
Yeah.
And they have every single right to call themselves a patriot because it's it's a crappy government. I mean, they're trying to
Yeah.
ban their own, not they, the people in charge of the Ukrainian government. They're trying to like crack down and ban their own religion and stuff. And they're trying to
Yeah.
Western degeneracy.
Yeah. Well, that actually gets like that's an even deeper topic. We'll definitely cover it like in the stream, but like
Mhm.
going back to the population though, right? So from 2014, their population is getting smaller, right? The millions of people just leaving Ukraine, and what's funny is that this one let's say I'm not going to name any names, but this chick I know lives here in the United States. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. So you left Ukraine in 2014, right? And I'm
Mhm.
thinking that's when the Donbass situation started. You know, like you're not under any threat at the time, right? So, and you're also from like I don't know central Ukraine, like you're definitely not under any threat. So why did you come to America, right? And on top of that, like basically like you know like it made no sense to me, right? I'm thinking, wait a minute, like why did you leave, right? Why did you come here, right? Now, if a Ukrainian came here to America in 2022, like I'd still get it, right? But it's because even like even the ones who love like their country or their government, right? They still understand that life is just not livable in Ukraine, so they come here. So going back to
Mhm.
population, their population was getting smaller from 2014, right? Because I think it's kind of ironic that a lot of these people who left, they started the Maidan, then after they created this Maidan in 2014, they decided to leave, right?
Mhm.
But anyways, so prior to like because during the Maidan situation, like in 2014, their population was like I don't know, like 40 million, I believe. And then like by 2022 it was like a little bit smaller. And then like when Russia invaded, like the numbers went down. Like so like the population went down like by several million. Like
Mhm.
several million just left the country.
Isn't it like 36 million or something like that now?
Probably, I don't know.
Something like
But
that.
yeah, but it's no longer 40 million. That's the thing. Like it's like how do you like and this is not even war casualties. These are just people leaving the country. And
Mhm.
a lot of them are men. They're not even like women. These are
Oh
men.
yeah. I mean, we saw a very similar thing with the migrant crisis in Syria. America destabilizes a country, color me shocked, and thousands of military age males go to Europe to reap the benefits of societies opening up for them and do heinous things of which I've heard actually there's large waves of crime happening in Western and Central Europe from all of these
Imagine
military
my
age men.
shock.
You're imagine my shock. And like I've seen more than enough reports of Polish, Czech, and German people just wrathfully mad at these ne'er-do-wells coming into their towns and causing trouble. Like, I get it if you don't want to fight a war, but don't be rude to your host country who's saving your life.
Well, speaking of rudeness, like I remember like watching a video, right when the war started, right when like Russia invaded Ukraine, some folks made it all the way to the Baltics, and
Mhm.
one of those countries was Lithuania, a former Soviet republic, right? So basically, a Ukrainian and Lithuanian, they don't speak each other's language, but there's a common language that both of them speak. It's Russian because they're both from, they used to live in the Soviet Union, right? And
And
so, anyways,
if
so
I
this,
remember right, sorry to interrupt. I know most of the my bad, Baltic countries.
yeah,
Don't mix those up. Most of the Baltic countries have something like a 30% literacy in Russian, and they have every Estonia and Latvia have 25% of their country is ethnically Russian, and then uh, Lithuania is 20% ethnically Russian, but they all have about 30% literacy.
yeah, like I did not look at those statistics regarding the Baltics,
I've
so
I've
I
had
don't
to
know.
argue.
But yeah, but I would not be surprised either that like people still speak Russian because
A
like
lot.
actually speaking of this, I definitely should not be surprised because actually 2 or 3 years ago before this whole war situation, I was going through like these chat rooms, like those video chat rooms where you just kind of skip on a person, you just
Yeah,
skip,
yeah,
yeah.
Omegle.
Yeah, like it was like a Russian version of that. It's like video chat something. But
Mhm.
uh, I don't I don't necessarily recommend it because there are some creepy people on there. But sometimes I'll get like an interesting conversation. I'll get like a heated debate or just a nice chill conversation with someone. It would be either or. And I remember like because it says the name of the country next to a person, next to the
Mm,
person you're talking to. Like so like people would be like, "Oh, you're from the USA." Like, "Yeah, I'm from America," right? And so anyways, I see this one dude and it says Lithuania and I'm like, "Hey, uh hey, how's it going?" I start speaking Russian to him, right? And he responds in Russian with no accent, just casual Russian. Goes, "Hey, how's it going, man?" Like I'm like, "Oh, you're from Lithuania?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm from Lithuania. Like, you're from USA?" I'm like, "Cool." He's like, "Oh, awesome, cool." I'm like, "Well, happy." Oh, it was like a New Year's Eve type of thing.
yeah.
It was like 2019, I think. And he goes, "Well, Happy New Year's, buddy. Happy New Year's." And we just had a casual like Russian conversation with this Lithuanian. So, but anyways, going back to rudeness that we mentioned about the migrants, right? So Ukrainian migrants are also very entitled people, um,
I've
and
noticed that.
well, basically, like there were multiple instances in like Western Europe, some of the countries that took them over, but in the Baltics, in Lithuania, there was a video that I saw like a year and a half ago, and basically, it's like illegal apparently to spit on the streets in Lithuania, right?
And
Because
like we
they're
need
trying
we
to
need to bring that to America.
well they're trying to be European. I'm thinking okay,
Mhm.
fine, okay, cultured people, okay. And so this Ukrainian woman, she spits, and of course the police officer telling her, "Hey, ma'am, you got to pay a fine, right, for what you've done." And so that this one other civilian, she's filming on her phone, and so basically phone, and the woman is telling her, "Hey, look, I'm a Ukrainian refugee, right?" And the woman tells her exactly, but you're a guest in our country. You got to pay the fine. She goes, "No, I don't have to." She pulling out her passport. She's like, yeah, look, I'm from Ukraine. And the Lithuanian woman's filming this and she's saying, look, like, I don't care if you're from Ukraine. You're Lithuania. You're my country now. Please respect the laws of my country. Oh,
Lord.
yeah.
I I will tell you the event that turned me on them was it was only a couple of weeks ago.
I thought the Donbass made you turn on them.
Honestly, that was a huge part about it. But there was like one event that like fully, you know how like you flip a switch and you can kind of get it like in between. And it's kind of more towards one side than the other. there was one that finally flicked it, and it was about a couple weeks ago. A 18-year-old Ukrainian refugee boy in Pilsen. He raped a 15 or 16-year-old girl. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that
Mm.
word, so you can
Well,
bleep it out. Sorry. Um, and he tried to strangle her and kill her and threw her in a garbage bag and threw her like in a ditch. And people were arguing, oh, it's not his fault. He's been through a lot. Like, what? Good Lord, people. What is
mhm.
wrong with you? Like,
Yeah,
he's been through a lot. Oh, he lost his country. I don't care. He literally tried to, he did terrible things to a 15-year-old girl who will
mhm.
never forget that. And then he tried to kill her. Like, how
Hey,
terrible.
here's the thing. If a Russian soldier did that,
Oh, God.
it'll be
Never
like
hear the end of
this
it.
is the Antichrist here.
Yep. Oh, they're did it because they're an evil, warlike people.
By the way,
They
so
always say.
there actually was a situation where a Russian soldier acted very inadequately, right? And
Mhm.
actually, I think what he did was a lot worse than what you described. But here's the thing: this was an individual soldier, and he was put on trial in Russia, for what he did, and boom, he's in prison.
Good.
you know,
Good.
yeah. So yeah, like basically, like if a Russian soldier is caught doing something bad to civilians, they get imprisoned. In Ukraine, they get released. And here's a quick story about the Tornado Battalion. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tornado Battalion.
I think it sounds familiar.
So in 2014, 2015, the Tornado Battalion, they're one of those battalions that were started by, some private corporation.
Uh, mhm. Mm.
Yeah, we know what type of corporations they were. So
No, I have
Tornado,
no idea what you're talking about.
yeah, like they wear very funny hats.
Yeah, where did you guys get those Tavor rifles and Meprolite optics?
Yeah,
Surely.
what's interesting is that like Ukrainian government soldiers were like thinking, hey, how come these private battalions are getting all this equipment while we're getting nothing? We're getting like like we're not even getting food, or like we've got nothing.
Mhm.
Our equipment doesn't work while these private battalions like they're being equipped very well. And so Tornado Battalion was one of those battalions similar to Azov,
Mhm.
and so the difference between Azov and Tornadoes, they were caught too many times, right?
Uh,
And
mhm.
so in the Donbass, a lot of their members, some of their leadership also as well, they would do stuff to children that was very, very, evil, right?
Mhm.
And this was in the Donbass, right? On top of that, like before I continue with the Tornado Battalion, there was an American guy who joined Ukraine originally when the civil war happened in the
It
Donbass
wasn't
region.
Texas, was it?
No, that's not. No, not
Okay.
him. I forgot the name of this guy, but he's an American. He joined the Ukrainians. Like he
Mm.
was fighting.
Oh,
He
right,
was
right.
fighting for the
Texas
Ukrainians,
was
and then
DNR.
he saw I forgot which group he was in. I think he was in right sector. I think it was right sector or something else, or it was probably regular military. I don't know, but he was surprised when like a group of Ukrainian soldiers offered him to take advantage of some teenage girl, and he's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And like they're like, whatever, like this is normal, right? So they grab this girl, they're about to do some bad stuff to her, right? So he obviously is thinking, wait a minute, like what side? Why am I fighting for Ukraine? These guys are bad guys. I thought they were good guys, right? So what he does, he kills all of them. He kills all of them. And then he takes that girl with him. They both cross onto the Donetsk rebel side, and he
Yeah.
switches sides. He joins the Donetsk rebels. He goes, "Yeah, I just realized you guys are actually the good guys."
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, funny you mentioned that. I have a friend who, if I remember right, he was in Azov. He was very young. He was like 17 when he joined. Um, and ever since this war started, he went because he wasn't like the foaming at the mouth, vicious, like you see a lot of American and Western nationalists are these like very
Nationalists.
nationalists, right?
Yeah.
They're very, very angry. They're very, very hateful. and they're like the easiest people to psyop. These are the type of people who, before the war started, they hated Ukraine. They liked Russia because Russia was anti-American government. And now, magic, flip the switch. They love Ukraine and they think Ukraine's going to save the world. He wasn't like that. He's actually very good, very very good young man. And if I remember it, he joined Azov, and he said like saw all the terrible things they were doing, and that completely changed my mind. And sorry, it's very dry here.
Yeah.
And that changed his mind. He had a change of heart, and he realized those were not the good guys. Like it didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter that they had a magical symbol that
Mm-hmm.
certain dissidents like. What mattered was they were doing some pretty genuinely awful things to their own people
Yeah.
too.
Yes. Well, exactly. Like, well, by the way, speaking of dissidents, half of them are like probably feds anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Like
It's
half of them are
very
probably feds trying to spread a certain agenda, just to keep
yes,
the actual true dissidents confused, like they're because a lot of dissidents they're also wondering, wait a minute, so Ukraine is supposed to be the good guy, but they're doing this, I'm confused,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why like the feds have these fake dissidents as well who will be like, well, yeah, support Ukraine because no matter what they do, they're always going to be good, right? And also,
Yes.
like, don't you read Midas, right?
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, that I'm sure everyone, if you're paying attention to the American political sphere, certain red and black wearing, not the normal ones, red and black wearing dissidents of what one could call right wing view popped up in Florida, and they were doing some stuff. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen the footage, but like I saw like screenshots of
Yeah,
that.
you're familiar with it.
Yeah,
I guess a couple of them, including that very ugly face
but
tatted
yeah,
fellow. They have admitted they work for the government.
hmm
They've talked
yes,
about it.
yeah. Like they said, Joe Biden is a good guy.
Yeah, one of them said, and people will say, "Oh, that's not him in the pictures. He photoshopped himself into the pictures." Those pictures are so clearly photoshopped, like a chimp could tell that they're photoshopped.
Yeah,
But that doesn't make up for the fact that he said, "Oh, yes, the government sent me over there." Why would he say that? Does he want clout? If he wants clout, what kind of people is he dealing with? And even then, devil's advocate, does that sound like something the government wouldn't do?
mhm,
Hmm? People? Like, come on. Really? Really? You don't think the
yeah,
government would take prisoners that are extremists and then fly them across the ocean to do bad things? Darn it.
exactly. So, anyways, going back to Tornado
Yes,
Battalion, right?
sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. Like, but going back to Tornado Battalion. So, as I mentioned, they've done some really bad things to children in the Donbass
Sorry
region.
about the dogs barking.
Oh, no, that's fine. I can barely hear them. But basically, they were caught. So eventually, even the Ukrainian government in 2015, 2016, they had to arrest these guys because they're basically like, there's like so much evidence that these are, real. The Tornado Battalion had to be arrested by the Ukrainian government because they're just way too exposed. So they arrested the leadership. They arrested a lot of the guys involved in all the evil things they've done because like even the Ukrainian government they could not afford to turn a blind eye to this one because like it was beyond their control, right? So they realized, yeah,
Yeah.
we got to stop these guys because they're making us look bad. And the Donbass rebels, the Donetsk and the Lugansk rebels, they would definitely use this as propaganda,
Yeah.
right? And they'd be right because it's true. And so Tornado Battalion had to be arrested immediately. So they arrested him, they throw him in jail, and then years go by, like the civil war of the Donbass continues, right? Those guys, they're in jail, they're in Kiev in jail, right? Then Russia invades Ukraine, right? And here's the thing: Russian troops are in the Kiev Oblast in the beginning of the war, right? Like in a month, they're ready, like in the Kiev Oblast. They're 30 minutes away from Kiev, right? And there's so much panic going on in Kiev. Zelensky is just dropping off random crates on the streets of Kiev randomly, right?
That was a terrible idea,
Yeah,
by the
yeah,
way.
yeah. By the way, on top of that, like before we continue with Tornado Battalion, just to kind of like a side note, there was actually a pro-Russian militia formed in Kiev. Like they were underground, of course, but they're like, "Hey, we're in Kiev. We're ready for the Russians to come here." You know,
Madness causing death.
I mean, lucky for them, lucky for the Ukraine government. Like Russians never went into Kiev. Lucky for them, right?
Hmm.
Because there would have been some street fighting on the inside.
That would have been that would have been
Yeah,
something.
yeah, and like before we
Ugh.
continue with the tornado battalion, I even saw a video where an SBU officer, he was arrested by the Kiev police because they thought he was a Russian spy, and he's like saying, "No, I'm like following someone else." And then, he goes, Check my ID. Look, it's in my pocket. Check my ID. I'm with the SBU." Like the panic was so bad in Kiev because Russians were literally like 30, 40 minutes away from Kiev.
Yeah.
And
Well,
but
I mean,
yeah,
it's still bad. It's
yeah,
just,
but Tornado Battalion though, right? They were released by Zelensky at that
but
moment in 2022. They were released by Zelensky immediately. This and people were shocked. Now, of course, Western media does not report on this. Western media is not aware of this Tornado Battalion, right? And so basically, like Russian networks, Russian social networks are thinking, "Wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is the Tornado Battalion being released?" And like, don't you know what these guys have done? And like Zelensky kind of just ignores everything. Like, these guys need to fight. So Tornado Battalion gets released. Prisoners, like lots of prisoners from Ukraine get released, by the way. Like I'm thinking, wait a minute, like everything that's attributed to the Soviet Union and their tactics is literally unraveling in Ukraine.
mhm. It's, I mean, they're
You
hypocrites. What
know,
can I say?
but what's interesting is that these rapists, right? These murderers, these evil people, like they're basically like I guess you could say like Epstein level people, right? Like
Hmm.
when it comes to
Oh,
doing whatever
were
they
they that
do.
bad?
Yeah, yeah, like they were really that bad. That's what they were arrested in 2015, 2016 because
Hmm.
the Ukrainian government realized, yeah, we got to arrest these guys. They're released by the
Yeah.
Ukrainian government because the Russians are invading and we need as many men as possible to fight. And so you like I think it's kind of like ironic that like the Western media they started like making fun of Wagner for recruiting certain prisoners from Russian prisons, but they totally ignored Tornado Battalion and what they've done in 2014, 2015,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden they get released in 2022. Like despite the fact that what they've done was super evil, right?
Oh yeah, it's the old adage: one man's
Yeah,
freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
yeah,
Uh, as long as they're useful to America's geopolitical
yeah.
goals, they'll have the best PR in the world because they own the PR for America.
Well, the thing is, Wagner, like, here's the thing with Wagner, like, they did not just recruit any prisoners, right? Like, these were guys who had some kind of minor offense, or if it was like a really bad offense, like I don't know, like let's say you killed your wife's lover or something, right? There's like you're super passionate, you just kind of couldn't handle it, you just like something like that, right? But these were not serial killers that were being released, like these were not people who like
Mm-hmm.
murder just for sake of murder, right? Like or like someone who robbed a bank, or robbed a grocery store or something like that.
Yeah, petty,
Some
but
stupid stuff like that. Like those guys,
what one can
like they were
call
given
kind of the pettier crimes.
yeah, like pettier crimes, or like I said, if it was murder, it was kind of it was like a case by case basis. What kind of murder and why, and also do you identify as innocent or guilty too? Like so it wasn't like these were actual like murderers and evil men who want to do evil stuff to women. These were just uh prisoners who were checked. They checked their background and they say, okay, which ones can we actually put in the battlefield because they were thinking, okay, like these guys, they have a chance. What would they prefer to rot in prison the rest of their lives, or shoot some Ukrainian soldiers and get a pardon after that, right?
Yeah.
So like it was like this incentive. But here's the thing, though, the vast majority of Wagner, they were not prisoners anyway. Like the whole prisoner recruitment stuff, they were like a minority. They were a tiny minority in the whole
Yeah,
Wagner situation.
I never believed that whole like, oh, it's 40,000 of them and 30,000 of them are prisoners.
Oh no,
Like that,
that's BS. No, like the vast majority
yeah,
of them
like
are not
that's,
prisoners. No.
yeah, you know what that is? That's how you get a revolt on your hands. That's how you get a mutiny. Like that's
Yeah.
not a good idea. And as much as Americans have this idea that if someone's their opponent, they have no faculties of thought. so they think, oh, they're the Russians. They must be really stupid because they disagree with me. No, they're pretty intelligent. You know, people generally think before they do something,
Mhm.
so they wouldn't put a massive penal unit on its own. Like, it's,
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is, speaking of penal units, in the Donbass, like the Donetsk rebels in 2014, they were considering doing like a penal battalion program, like back during World War II, and the Soviet Union thought,
yeah.
maybe we should do penal battalions. But
I
but the
mean,
Donetsk
every
government
country,
decided, no, like we're not that big, we're not big enough to
yeah.
control that. Let's not do
I
it.
mean, and that's not a particularly uncommon thing. The United States had penal units in World War II. Germany had penal
Mhm.
units during World War II.
Germany for
Everyone,
sure. Like they have a
yeah,
lot of those. Yeah,
everybody does it in times
yeah,
of total war. It just
yeah,
depends, when is it total war,
yeah.
or for who are we talking about?
Yeah, like so I'm not familiar with the United States doing it, but I am familiar with Germany for sure. And so, but what's interesting is that the whole penal unit is only attributed to one group, to the USSR. I wonder
They
why.
did it. They wouldn't have single like unitary penal units, but they would take guys out of prison and then they would put them in standard units. And I mean, shit, they still do
Yeah,
that now.
yeah,
Like there's a big thing in the Gulf War where guys would get, they needed a lot of people. They, history shows that they actually didn't, but they were
mm,
trying to fill the ranks, so they would commute sentences by saying you could go to prison or you could join the Army or the Marines or whichever. And a
yeah.
lot of guys chose that.
Well, on top of that, regarding like penal units in the USSR, like the actual like pure penal units, most of them were basically military personnel anyway. Let's
Mhm.
say you're an insubordinate soldier, right, and you punch like a higher up in the face or something, right?
Yeah.
Or or you're an officer, like you're lieutenants, and you do not follow some certain orders, you get sent to penal unit, right? And so
Yeah.
like yeah,
Yeah.
so like the vast majority of penal units were mostly military personnel anyway, too. That's another thing
Mhm.
that gets left out by certain people. Yeah,
That is true. That is
yeah.
true.
But yeah, like we got a little sidetracked. We got into World War II, but anyways, so what's interesting is that like Ukraine is like fighting like was is fighting like the way the Soviet Union fought in World War II in 1941. And actually,
Yeah.
to be fair, to no, but to be fair, the Soviet Union still fought better in 1941 than Ukraine's fighting right now.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, on a tactical level, the Russians are too. They're using a lot of Soviet, like their premise of an active defense with static lines behind that and deep battle, which for those who don't know what that is, there's a lot of shelling. And they'll use light infantry units to infiltrate areas. Sounds familiar. Um, so they're both kind of fighting like the Soviet Union in similar and different ways. And I would say, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'd say a large part of that is just the heritage of the Ukrainians, despite what they will tell you. Being a former Soviet
Yes.
country,
Yeah.
a lot of their officer staff is still Soviet.
Yeah, like also a lot of the Ukrainian generals and the Russian generals, well, when they were like very young, they probably went to some of the same academies, and they were
They
probably
probably
classmates at
did.
one point.
Hmm.
I just think it's kind of interesting how the West literally just ignores this vital information that
Hmm.
Ukraine literally has, actual units that literally, like to hoo-ha women, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
And not just women, but like some of them are younger than women, if you know what I mean,
Yeah,
but that stuff
not
is
good.
ignored.
I mean, quick aside, that shouldn't surprise a lot of people when you have, it seems like every year there comes out a scandal about American units who are doing just that to their own people. I know this year there was a whole thing about special forces group out of Georgia who was doing it so much that they had
Just to verify, just like Georgia, USA, or Georgia, the
Georgia,
country.
USA. Yes,
Okay,
Georgia,
yeah.
USA. Sorry. There was, I'm pretty sure it was out of Georgia, and they were doing so much that they had to disband the entire group because if they penalized every single dude there that did it, they would have gotten rid of like 60% of the guys.
Oh
And when the
wow.
guys were interviewed, they said, "Well, what do you expect? We don't have a war to fight. We're bored." Like, what kind of sick animal does that?
Yeah.
So that's not like
Dang.
if people hear about this tornado battalion stuff and they think, well, America doesn't know about that. No, America does that to its own people
Hmm.
too. Like
Yeah.
that's and I kid you not, it's like every year, every other year, something like that happens. It comes out. It's the US military these days especially is rife with pretty unsavory things.
Oh, it's rife with a lot of unsavory
Oh.
things. Like
Yeah.
some of them are not even like really men. Yeah.
American mindset, and I've
Yeah.
spent way more time trying to understand it than like your average person. Um, the American mindset is just something. It's something, and
Well,
that's like a whole hour long
it's
discussion.
not a critical mindset.
No, it's not. It's really
No.
not. It
Well,
like
like we have a few critical people like Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor.
yes, there's some very, very intelligent, critical people, but like I remember when the war started a year and change ago, almost 2 years, a lot of Americans treated it as though the Russians were attacking Ukraine for no reason to make this person in America who's completely irrelevant angry that it's happening. Like a lot
Hmm.
of them took it personally.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't understand why they would do that because it makes me sad. And if you try to explain to them, well, this history goes back 100 years, like this isn't just like a flash in the pan thing. This history goes back 100 years. This conflict has been brewing for decades. They're just like, I just don't get it. It's
Yeah.
so weird. Like I feel like a part of it is a hangover from the boomer culture, the kind
Hmm.
of we should all love and get along. I can't explain it short of an
It's kind of weird because like the boomers say we should all love and get along, but it's okay for us to take over countries, Iraq, Libya,
Yeah,
Syria.
I remember when the whole like Joe Biden and the Ukraine thing, Hunter Biden, and you had a lot of Republicans saying, I heard a few even say, let's invade Ukraine to see what's at the bottom of this. And because for people who are not aware, the Republican Party is filled to the gills with militarists, and not like the cool militarists, like the industrial complex militarists, like Nikki Haley. That's a great example of it. And all they want is to invade places because they don't care. Their children are never going to go fight a war. They just
Hmm.
care about their money. And it was so funny. It was like they wanted to invade Ukraine, and then as soon as Russia steps in for a policing action, which I'm comfortable saying it's a policing action,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
then these Republicans are screaming like, "No, we have to invade Russia. It's
Yeah.
terrible. Poor little Ukraine." Like,
Yeah.
you idiot! 5 minutes ago, you wanted to invade it. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, like seriously, what will be really cool and really based if the United States government signs a peace treaty with Russia right now, an alliance,
Mhm.
and invades Ukraine from the west.
I would love to see
And
that.
here's the thing. So obviously, this is a pipe dream. This is
Just
not going to happen. But,
Molotov Ribbentrop
yeah.
it, just split it in two.
Exactly. No, but here's the thing though. So here's the thing. So like obviously I don't believe this. Like this is a pipe dream, but Ron DeSantis made the claim that the moment he becomes president, day one, he's going to invade Mexico. Personally, I think that's based. I
He
think that's
said
cool.
that.
Yeah, he said that. He said day
Oh my
one,
god.
he'll do invade Mexico, like they declare war. And I'm thinking,
Good
dang, I
lord.
would totally re-enlist just for just to go invade
That
Mexico.
will be that will be terrible. Like it sounds fun, but like most people don't know
Yeah,
how thick Chinese and
yeah,
not just the
yeah,
Taliban, but other like Eastern terror groups are involved in Mexico and
yeah.
South America.
But my whole point is that basically here's what we should do. So Ron DeSantis, like again, this is a pipe dream. This is not going to
Mhm.
happen, but but I wish this would happen,
Not
right?
with that mindset.
Yeah. So like I wish, so if DeSantis, let's say he wins, he becomes president, and he does declare war on Mexico, what he should do simultaneously, is make an alliance with Russia, where
Hmm.
some American troops invade Ukraine from the west, and certain Russian troops will invade Mexico as well. And
From
then so here's the thing, like Russia
out
gets
of
support.
Venezuela.
So Russia owns a portion of Mexico. The United States owns a portion of Mexico. The United States controls a certain part of Ukraine. Russia controls a certain part of Ukraine.
That
And
would be funny.
basically bring back imperialism.
Single-handedly fix society.
And here's the thing, like I'm 50-50 with the whole imperialism thing. Like, I mean, on the one hand, I see its problems, but on the other hand, I'm okay with empire as long as, like, because on the one hand, empire kind of helped nations, be friends with each other in a way.
Mhm.
Nations kind of
It
respected
did.
each other, you
Yeah.
know, and then like post empire, like we have like colonial stuff. Like, because here's the thing, like when you're an empire, not a colony. When you're part of the empire, you're not a colony. It's different, by the way. So imperialism and colonialism are not necessarily the same thing, too. You know,
Mhm.
like, because when you're a colony, you're simply like, you're not even a vassal state. You're just a colony. You guys are barbarians. Like, we're just using your resources, right? But when you're part of the empire, you have some respect, because you're part of this
Mhm.
empire. You're part of this community, right?
Yes.
That's the point of empire.
Like the English Dominion
Oh,
treated their subjects very well, some of their subjects treated their member states
yeah.
like Canada very
Mhm.
different from their member states like what became later Rhodesia.
Yeah, true. But like the English, are they really human? So that's a different
I
question.
I ask myself that every single day and I
Speaking,
have not a
yeah.
solid answer.
Well, speaking of the English, Boris Johnson, for example. So by the way, like a lot of people don't know that Boris Johnson is the reason why the war in Ukraine still exists.
I hear that, but
Yeah.
I've never looked into the
Yeah.
exact details
So
of why.
basically, if you saw the map in 2022, you saw the map, right? So around
Mhm,
March and April 2022, you see the map. Russia is in northern Ukraine as well.
mhm.
Russia is controlling Kherson completely. They're controlling it like the Kharkiv region. They're kind of going. It's like it was always a mixed bag. They're going back and forth there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the north, basically the Kiev region, and the Sumy region, like half the Sumy region, half the Kiev region, controlled by Russia, right? Like, so Russians, like, they tell Zelensky, okay, let's do some peace talks. So his diplomats and Russian diplomats, they meet in Turkey, and they do sign an agreement. Russia says, here's the thing: we'll withdraw all troops, like, right now, if we just, if you agree to not join NATO, we will take Donbass, because that thing, okay, fine, like 8 years of violating Minsk Accords on your behalf. Okay, you guys were not following the Minsk Accords. We'll take the Donbass under our wing, right? And just don't join NATO, and we will leave Ukraine completely, right? And then they signed this peace deal, right? Boris Johnson flies into Kiev because here's the thing. What's interesting is that you look at the map in like 2022, like around mid-April, all of a sudden Russians are leaving northern Ukraine. They're leaving the Kiev region. They're leaving the
Mm,
Sumy region, right? And
that's
so
why
now,
Kharkiv
like, here's the
was
thing
kind of
though. Like,
like a
in the
fiasco,
West,
right?
but in the West, there were two stories about this. In the West, they're saying, "Oh, look, Russians are regrouping. They're going to regroup their soldiers and move them south." And and
Oh,
and a second story, a second mainstream story in the West, oh, Russians are retreating. Ukraine's pushing them back. No, 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 no. Ukraine's not push anybody back. They couldn't. Like, they didn't have the manpower to push anybody back. So Boris
gotcha.
Johnson, around that time period, right as the peace deal was signed, Boris Johnson, that Angloid, he flies over into Kiev, says, "Oh no, don't you sign anything. We'll protect you. Like, continue the war with Russia." Like, he
Mhm.
literally just told Zelensky, "Dude, forget that peace deal thing. Like, forget the whole thing. Just continue the war. We'll back you up." And that's when all of a sudden, so here's the thing: Russians, once they leave the northern regions of Ukraine, conveniently, Boris Johnson tells Zelensky, "Okay, like, continue the war. Don't stop." Russians left northern Ukraine and parts of other parts of Ukraine out of, courtesy, to say, okay, we're, slowly withdrawing. Okay, so we're moving our troops out of here. But the moment Boris Johnson told Zelensky, no, don't do this, like, don't agree to anything,
Hmm.
just keep fighting, we'll back you up. That's when the Russians, had to eventually move those troops to the south.
Yeah.
you know
I always wonder what that whole like where the hell did Kharkiv go? Like, huh?
Well,
That was a
Kharkiv,
very
like
weird
the
thing.
Kharkiv region, like it was always like a mixed bag anyway. Like for some
Mhm.
reason, whoever was in charge of that particular group was always kind of like a weird person because
Gotcha.
the Russians are kind of going back and forth, and the Ukrainians are playing like tag. They're playing tag with the Russians. They're going back and forth here and there, the
Okay.
Kharkiv region. But yes, like what's interesting, yeah, like because of the Angloids, Ukraine is now suffering even more. So
Imagine my shock.
yeah.
And that this is like the fifth time it's happened in history.
And so what's interesting is that because of this action, right, Russians obviously stayed in the southern part of Ukraine, right? They're thinking,
Mm.
okay, fine, we're definitely not leaving then. Okay, so we'll hold on to the southern part. And all of a sudden, on the streets of Kherson, on the streets of Melitopol, and other cities in the south, right? There are these billboards saying, "Oh, Russians and Ukrainians, we are one people, one ethnic people, one group of people."
Mm-hmm.
like
Hmm.
uh that's pretty interesting. I wonder why. Maybe like because originally Russians did not have this propaganda. Originally they did not, like
Mm-hmm.
originally did not come in with that propaganda. They simply came in, we'll give the locals humanitarian aid if they need it, because it's a war, it's a military operation. So the
That's how you
locals,
getting rebels.
yeah, yeah. So the locals, they're getting aid, food, medicines, but there was no propaganda. But as soon as Zelensky violated the whole peace term that Boris Johnson, told Zelensky to violate, all of a sudden Russians start to throw in propaganda in the southern regions that they controlled, saying, "Yeah,
Huh.
you know what? You're all Russians, you know." And I'm thinking, yes, yes, finally, yeah.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. I mean, it only makes sense with how a lot of these European countries with puny militaries, mind you, puny little piddly militaries, like England has a tiny one. I think the Netherlands has like 4,000 men in its armed forces total. It was
Oh
like
wow.
insultingly small. Like I myself was shocked.
Oh wow.
Um,
Like I'm not aware of this. So.
yeah, I think the Netherlands only has a couple thousand guys. It's like shocking when you find out how few, and they have like 20,000 in reserve at the most. But that's like the Low Countries in general, and we all know Germany has like 40% usability of their armored vehicles and aircraft because they're in such disrepair. It's these piddly little countries who are they, they could not fight a war to save their lives, but they're willing to let Ukrainians die for.
Hmm.
I don't think even they know what they want the war to continue for.
Well, like at this point, like I guess they're trying to save face at this point.
Mm,
It's kind of like, okay, Russia just has to lose. We got to prove to
yeah.
our Western citizens here that Russia, like they can't fight. Like, what's funny is that like what really like angered me is Steven Crowder. Um, you're aware of Steven Crowder, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
know his wife left him because
yeah. He's
um
he's a POS. Yeah.
he bends a certain way, you could say.
Ooh,
Yes, that's his so his wife
I did not
recently.
know that part. So,
Yes, his wife recently divorced him because he bends a certain way, and
but
people
I'll
will
not be
say
surprised because he does cross dress. So,
he cross dresses so much. It's like, guys, this should not be surprising.
anyways, so Steven Crowder, like sometimes I'll just hate watch this stuff, like because I'm just trying to keep updated on what do conservative commentators, what are they talking about, right? And Steven Crowder, like the guy, like he's always trying to sound smart. He's trying to stay relevant on issues that he doesn't even know what he's talking about, But he's just trying to like talk about some issues. Like he sounds like a boomer sometimes, right?
He spiritually is,
And
and
so what's
that's
funny is that like he goes like because he was replaying Tucker Carlson's video where Tucker Carlson said, we might go to war with Russia and we might not win, right? And like Tucker said, we're probably not going to win. And Steven Crowder, like he took that personally. He goes, "Oh, like no, like we could still win that war, right? Like maybe a nuclear war we all lose, right?" And I'm thinking, like, you're just stupid, dude. Like, do you not pay attention to what's going on in Ukraine? And then he says, "Oh, and the Russian military, it's a joke." I'm thinking, "Oh, really?" Like,
um
do you not keep updates like on what's going on in Ukraine right now? Like,
my
because it's not.
brother in Raw. We have uh, I was gonna say a man in a dress, but I'm not prejudiced like that, and I don't want to be bleeped out or censored. We have a wonderful woman in charge of what's that one? Joe Biden put in charge.
Oh, the
You know the
Skittles person in
I
Kiev.
oh no, that's a different
Oh,
one.
that's a different one.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness, yeah,
Okay.
it's like my
Oh, the one in charge of
brother-in-law.
the Navy.
Yes, that's
That
the
one.
one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's like my brother-in-law. We are the joke. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? I swear, that's because Steven Crowder, he spends a lot of times with like, and I spent some time with these people when I was in a university. He spends a lot of time with like BoomerCon groups, and just because I say BoomerCon doesn't mean like they have to be baby boomers. Like Charlie Kirk, BoomerCon.
He's a boomer, yeah.
I've talked with him personally. I've talked with his funders personally. They're like, they are so out of touch. It's insulting. Like they don't know the price of a gallon of gas pretty much. These like commentators, a lot of them have no idea what's going on in reality because they just like hang out in their studios all day and they have other people do all the important life things
Yeah.
for them.
And to be honest, like I'll not be surprised if Steven Crowder just gets his research from some dumb, from some dumb Zoomer who's probably, like
Oh,
a copy paste some Fox News article, and Steven Crowder
mhm.
kind of goes, "Oh yeah, I'm well informed."
He gets a lot of it from TikTok, and I can confirm that because he said he's gotten a lot of it from TikTok. So
Oh wow, yeah,
he's he's not a smart person.
yeah. But here's the thing, though. Unfortunately, that's like the American mentality too when it comes to the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. Like
Hmm.
they don't realize that this is not just Ukraine fighting. This is basically like Russia fighting with NATO right now, and NATO is losing all their equipment in Ukraine against Russia.
Yeah, I remember specifically when the war started, and people were like, "They think they're going to take the country in 3 days." Nobody said that. Um, and they were
Like
showing,
Russia never said that. Like Russia never made
yeah,
that claim.
Russia never said that. That was only made by Western media personnel or
Well,
personality.
I know who made that claim. It was a General Miley.
Was it
General
Miley?
Miley, yeah, he made that
Okay.
claim.
Yeah. So there we go. General Miley said they're going to take it in 3 days. The only reason people believe that is because that's the only reason Americans, like, that's the only way Americans fight. Americans fight very quick, violent wars immediately, and then they fight protracted insurgencies, which they never win. They haven't won a protracted land war since 1945. And that's just not me saying that. That's military theorists and military historians who have said that. The reason they fight wars so quick is because after about 3 weeks, Americans get tired of hearing about stuff. That's why so many people are fatigued with the Ukraine war right now. That's why people were saying, "Oh, the Ukrainians are going to take over Russia and Russia's going to collapse." Surprise, surprise, it didn't happen. Now so many people are tired of American money going over and funding such a pointless, it really is pointless war.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Eh,
I remember what I was
yeah.
going to. Sorry. I remember like right at the beginning of this war, people were showing, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of them. Oh, look at this pretty Ukrainian girl. She just found a Russian tank abandoned in the field. Oh, look, they're driving it around. So funny. They stole a Russian tank. Every single one, it's like, where's the Z? There's no
Yeah.
Z on it. You know, like where's the Z?
But
They did,
where's the Z?
yeah. And I've told that to people. They're like, look at this. It's like, where's the Z?
Yeah,
Uh,
ever since the war started, Russians would put either a Z or an O or a V.
hmm.
And actually, like together, so basically ZOV, Zov, it means like the call, basically
Oh,
the
is that what it
call of
is?
duty, basically,
Ah, gotcha.
Zov, because for a while, like it kind of made me like, but then because we're millennials still, and there's the internet. Eventually, I kind of put all that together. I'm like, oh, it's Zov. It means the call. Basically implying the call of duty, Zov. Yeah,
I always wondered what that was because like
yeah. Because I was
it
wondering
clearly
why do
means
some
something.
tanks have O's? Why do some have V's on there? Yeah. And then like, oh,
Gotcha.
Zov. Oh, ZOV. Okay.
I will say, what was really cool was the
Yeah.
red Z, and where the Wagner guys had that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
The
That
red
one.
Z, like I know the white Z is cool. The red Z was like Okay, now that's cool, and it was dripping enough to where it was like that.
Mhm.
That's Kino, and then nothing happened from that whole event, um, which did not surprise
Yeah,
me.
but what's interesting is that when the U.S. government basically said, "Oh, Ukraine will lose in 3 days," they basically disrespected their own allies. Basically, the Russians, they're not interested in destroying Ukrainians, right? Because they're a fellow Slavic country, right? And on top of that, they view them
Yes.
as brothers. They view them as the same exact nationality. Not all Russians, but like even the Russians who don't view them that way, they view them as a brotherly country because they share the same
Mhm.
historical history together, right? And then like all of a sudden, like there's the story how Russians, they just want to destroy Ukraine. No, Russians are not interested in fighting the way Americans fight with their enemies, right? Especially with Middle Eastern cavemen, right? That's how we fight. That's how the U.S. government fights. Russians are not treating Ukrainians like cavemen. They're treating them as their fellow, as their enemies, but they're still, simultaneously like trying to tell them, look, we're still brothers. We don't want to destroy your country. We're just trying to get rid of Zelensky. And like then there's this weird story about Bucha, how Russians just massacred a bunch of innocent people in Bucha. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
and
talking about?
everyone's complaining about. I mean, look, I'll be honest. There's more evidence that Atlantis exists, which there's a lot, than Bucha happened. Like it, a flash in the pan it happened. Oh my God, they're doing terrible things, and then 5 minutes later, people don't talk about it because it didn't happen. Um, it's like it's the media
I
being
totally I totally
terrible.
agree that there's totally more evidence that Atlantis existed compared to the whole Bucha situation.
Yeah, and the thing is, America making up or lying about war crimes is not a new thing. It's rife in American propaganda. What I mean by American propaganda, this is a recent one, by the way. The latest, so they revamped the Call of Duty series. They restarted the whole thing, and the
Oh,
first
the
one,
Cold War.
no, it was before Cold War. So the first one, it was just Call of Duty Modern Warfare. They had this Highway of Death, which, if you are familiar with Gulf War history, the Highway of Death was fleeing Iraqi civilians and military personnel that America just napalmed. They just burnt, killed thousands of people. They say it was only a few hundred. It was not a few hundred. It was a lot of people, and it went on for miles. But in this game, they said the Highway of Death was done by the Russians. Like it's just delusional.
What?
It's delusional. Yeah, yeah. You could look it up.
Wow.
You like
Hmm.
straight up. You can look it up. I
Well,
mean,
it's
that one was
just the whole baby's an incubator story. So yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
what's interesting is that Americans, they fall for this stuff, right? Like you show a couple of dead
They do.
bodies and you say, this is what our adversary is doing, and
Yeah.
they just eat it up.
I mean, it's because a lot of them think Americans are a very isolated people. So a lot of them still think we're kind of culturally in the 80s. And I mean, my family does this too. I love them, and I don't mean this like as a way of like talking ill on them. But I've talked with them about things like stuff that's on the television that's clearly wrong. And they don't really say it as much these days because they're like, oh, it's on the television, so it's probably wrong. But they used to say, but it's on the television. How could they lie? It was one of those like, how could they lie if it's on the television? It must be truth if it's on the television. But thankfully, a lot of that veneer is being broken. I mean, a lot of legacy media are losing money due to the decentralization of media, and fast media too have been doing wonders for that.
Yeah, well, like going back to the whole Bucha thing, like like the mayor of the city's like saying like oh look, the Russians are gone. Like I'm the mayor of the city. I'm back in the city. Oh, I'm so glad, it's liberated. And for an entire week, because Bucha, if you look at it, it's super, super tiny, right? Like it's not a big town, it's super small town. It's literally like a couple streets, right? And
Mhm.
so the mayor of Bucha, he's recording a selfie video. He's saying, hey guys, I'm back in Bucha. The Russians are pushed back. They were not, they simply left. And then for an entire week, he is silent on the whole bodies that were left behind by the Russians,
Hmm.
because like apparently like Russians, like, here's a whole street and bodies here, 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 and here, right? And what's interesting is that like the mayor, he was silent on the whole thing. Like, I'm
Hmm.
thinking, wait a minute, dude, your town is literally what, two, three, four streets? Like literally, like
Yeah.
you could not announce that on the same day. You could literally just said, guys, I'm so glad I'm back in my town, but look at what these evil Russians did to our civilians. But for some reason you're silent for an entire week, and then you bring it up. Then he brings
Yeah.
it up. Oh, look what the Russians have done. I'm thinking, really, dude?
But
Like, and the whole
it's
thing made no sense, because literally,
yeah.
like, what, 30 minutes that way, 1 hour that way, 40 minutes that way, Russians are giving humanitarian aid to civilians, helping people, sending medics to their homes to see if they needed any medical attention or stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, they say, oh yeah, let's leave Bucha and shoot a bunch of guys. Yeah, that's totally going to help our PR campaign.
Yep. And for
Yeah.
what? And
Yeah.
if you this I mean this kind of sounds macabre what I'm gonna say, but like it is. Slavs kill each other in very particular ways historically. If people, okay, different peoples commit ethnic cleansing different ways, right? Slavs don't kill each other that way. They kill each other in very very different
Well,
ways.
especially Croats and Serbs.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see how Slavs kill each other, look up the Volin massacre, which is
Oh yeah,
something people don't talk about. When a bunch of Banderites killed, I think it was like 20,000 Poles or
Polish
something.
people. Yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot, but that's swept under the rug because they're wonderful people, right?
yeah. Well, like, what's interesting, prior to the Russian invasion, many Poles were bringing that up, the whole Banderite issue, right?
Mhm.
And then,
Yep.
like you said, they sweep it under the rug because it's inconvenient to talk about that right now at the
Yeah.
moment.
Because how can they do that? A lot of I've noticed with people can't view things in flux. They can't look at it as people were bad then, but they're good now, or people were good
Mhm.
then, but they're bad now, because countries and cultures are in flux. They're changing constantly, right? So if people talked about the Volin massacre, then that would call into question the Ukrainians are good right now. Because if Ukrainians did something bad, then they can't be good right now. And this is not a condemnation of them, because everybody kills each other in history. Like that's
Okay, yeah.
fact. I'm sorry, people. The world is not hugs and cuddles. Um, but like one of the reasons they're not talking about that is because most people can't think like, oh, 80 years ago there was ethnic conflict between these two people, and they did it to each other. I mean, the Poles did pretty nasty things in the
Oh yeah.
40s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't like completely, I'm not saying it was called for, but it wasn't in a vacuum. But the reason they don't talk about it is because it would call into question people's concept of, oh, they did a bad thing. What do you mean they're not completely good?
Hmm.
um People are very very two-dimensional in their thinking.
Oh, General Sherman did a bad thing. I mean, and that's a different topic. Like, we could talk about that one like on a different session.
Yeah,
But
oh
I'm
my
just saying, yeah,
god.
wait, General Sherman did a bad thing.
That's
Yeah.
it's funny. I always saw when I saw the donuts flag, and I always thought it was the Confederate flag. I was like, what? Hold on, what's happening?
Well, the original like Donbass rebel flag was basically like the Confederate flag without the stars.
Yeah, yeah.
There's still a slight difference. You could see like
It's
the blue is a
slightly,
little bit thinner. It's not as thick as the Confederate blue.
but dude, I
Yeah.
was like, what on God's green earth is happening over there?
Oh, by the way, someone in the Donbass even recorded their own Russian version of Dixie.
I think I've seen that one.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I'm thinking, okay, like the audio is bad because someone did it in their own basement somewhere.
Mhm.
Like, but still, I'm thinking, okay, well, I like the premise of this.
Yep.
It's true. Like they're like rebelling against Ukraine, and so yeah, it made sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
anyways,
I feel for them.
but this whole like propaganda, like Americans don't do any research. They just accept information
No,
at face value. And here's the
yeah,
thing, although conservatives, a lot of them, they don't support Ukraine, but they will also have this attitude, well, I still don't trust Russia. I'm thinking, okay, well,
yeah.
you're still an idiot.
It's like
Yeah.
you don't have to trust Russia
Yeah, you
to
honestly
not.
you have to trust Russia and everything.
Yeah, it's um for a lot of people. This goes to the whole two-dimensional thing we've mentioned before. A lot of conservatives look at this very linearly, right? If if they want to not disenfranchise, what's the word? They're already disenfranchised. If you want to get rid of the legitimacy, remove legitimacy from the current administration, they should not be wanting America to win this conflict. If they want people to support their party, the Republican Party, more, they should be kind of defeatist about it,
Mhm.
and saying like, look at this terrible war, all this life lost, and they're gonna lose. And then when they eventually do lose, because they're gonna lose, that's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact. Russia's a larger power. They don't have the option. Everyone's trying to save face, but they just don't have the option to lose because there's more Russians than Ukrainians.
And on top of that, Russians have been proven to use better strategy and tactics as
Yes,
well.
they're better equipped. There's more of them. They're better fighters. It's an inevitable fact. That's
Well,
like me
here's the
saying
thing,
gonna rain.
like Russia's biggest flaw was basically the Kharkiv region, right? And
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing though. Here's what's interesting is despite their flaws in the Kharkiv region, right? Despite all that, it was the Ukrainians who were still losing like so many soldiers just to recapture territory. Well, Russians, what's interesting, for example, like there was a group of Russians they had to kind of pull out, but they couldn't because the Ukrainians were advancing on them and they were basically, the Russians were kind of semi-surrounded. And so, well, guess what? Like a small unit, it's not a large unit, a small unit of Wagner people, they show up with a backup with artillery to back them up, right? And a small group of artillery, not a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they literally push back the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians, like, here's the thing, they lost so many men, you know, and they lost so many men to a Russian retreat. So Russians are retreating and they're firing back, and the Russians were able to preserve the vast majority of the men they had to be pulled out of the part of the Kharkiv region. They were pulled out safely without any major casualties, like almost zero. And while
Yep.
Ukraine lost so many men, and here's the thing, they lost so many men while they were themselves retreating, right? They were retreating from the Wagner group and they're retreating from the artillery bombardment. And then when the Russians were completely gone from the Kharkiv region, Ukrainians show up. Oh yeah, look, we pushed back the Russians. No, you didn't. You ran away like a biatch, right? You ran away like a bunch of biatches, and then when the Russians leave, oh wow, like guess I won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but so even when Russia does have like any failings or flaws, or if Russia does retreat somewhere, they take a lot of Ukrainians with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Basic.
it's not due to like some massive firepower. It's also because of just retreating strategy. They have retreating tactics, how to
Yeah.
properly retreat as well. Ukrainians don't have this.
Yeah. It's a basic premise of warfare. If I remember right, Mao wrote about it in On Guerrilla Warfare, which it's like 50 pages. Everybody should read it. It's actually quite a
How
good
dare
book.
you promote communism?
Terrible. But he talks about you have three resources really, maybe four. So you have manpower, time, land, and material, and you're always deficient in one, but you can trade one for the other. So you can trade manpower for time, you can trade time for material, and you can trade material for land. And you're always in a sort of flux. Just because, and I'm not, I believe you, but I don't have like sources in front of me about Kharkiv, so I'm not going to state my opinion on it. But it's perfectly reasonable if a military is retreating in good order. They're sacrificing land for time, manpower, and material, and they're able to inflict. I mean, a retreating
What's
bombard.
interesting is that here in the West, we no longer believe in this idea of retreating,
Mm-hmm.
just by some
Yeah,
time and stuff. Like we believe
yeah,
in pushing forward, push forward, push forward. And that's what Ukraine has been doing, pushing forward the entire time. And
Yeah.
and here's the thing, they're barely doing it. Like they'll get like they'll conquer 2 centimeters of land, like and boom, oh wow, victory. We were
Mhm.
winning.
Well,
You know?
it's kind of that
Yeah.
football mindset. Like a retreating bombardment to inflict casualties on an opponent is not a new thing. It's been used since like the Napoleonic era. But a lot of Americans have this kind of football mindset of like, if for the people who don't know how football works, you have four downs and you have to cross 10 yards by the end of the fourth down. If you're not moving forwards, you're losing, kind of thing. So they always view it as you have to be moving forwards. You have to be moving forwards. As long as you're moving forwards, it doesn't matter what the sacrifice is. You might be losing dozens of men, a lot of injuries, and you're losing important material. But as long as you're moving forwards, you're winning. That's part of the
Like moving forward makes sense only if you have the capacity to do so. And
yes.
like, and here's the thing, like earlier, like way early in the stream, we mentioned how kind of both sides are kind of using Soviet tactics, but like Russians are using it better. It's because like Russians, they're fighting the way they would have fought in 1941 if Rokossovsky was in charge and not sorry, Timoshenko. So Timoshenko, he was in charge originally in 1941,
Mhm.
right? If Rokossovsky, if he was in charge originally, initially, then like in 1941, the Germans would not even make it to Moscow. They would not even be close to Moscow.
Mhm.
Like
And
they would have been pushed back. The Germans would have been pushed back to the western border. And so
yeah.
right now, like basically, like what's interesting is that Russians they're fighting basically the way Rokossovsky would have fought because Rokossovsky, out of all the Soviet commanders, he was the one who was able to simultaneously do two things: plan a huge strategic operation with very minimal loss of life for his troops,
Mhm.
like because he said like he does not view his soldiers as expendable, right? These are people, these are human beings, like we're all fighting, for our country right here, right?
Yeah.
So like basically he understood that like you can't just like keep running out of people, it's useless, right, to keep
Yep.
fighting like this. And that's what Ukrainians are doing. Ukrainians, they're fighting the way originally the Soviet Union fought in 1941, and Russians are fighting the way Rokossovsky fought in 1944.
Mhm.
And Russians, like that's why, like in certain areas, Russians, if there's like I don't know 100 Russians and they fought for like 3 weeks defending a tiny location, and like they have like no way to get reinforcements, they'll freaking be like, okay, like let's not waste any more lives, let's just retreat and call it a day, and they're totally
Yeah.
fine
And
with that.
that's something that like a lot of people don't get is there are situations where you just need to get out.
Yeah. Well,
There's there are situations.
on top of that, if the Russians are outnumbered, they'll still be able to somehow tactically take over a location,
Yeah.
while being outnumbered.
I
While
mean,
Ukrainians have a huge, like they'll have like a huge force,
mhm.
and they'll run away from a
Yeah,
small Russian
they do
force.
have Russians do have superior they're in a better material position. Like it strategy aside, they have more shells. And
Mhm.
as much as like as stupid as it sounds, just shelling the hell out of someone, it does the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's really caveman primitive, but it works,
Well,
you know?
yeah, and on top of that, what's interesting is that like because we mentioned the tanks earlier, like way early in the stream, we're talking about the tanks.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is that like what's the name of the British tank?
Oh,
It's
the
not
Challenger.
the Challenger.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
the Challenger. Yeah,
Challenger.
okay, yes. So like what was it, like a week and a half ago? A lot of them were destroyed by Russians using North Korean drones, because Russians they create like these new drones, these
Mhm.
kamikaze drones, and so North Koreans created their own version of kamikaze drones, and so Russians were testing them out, and they're able to destroy the British tanks, So
I mean, I've
yeah.
seen
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah. And
I've
what's
seen the
what's interesting is that you said Russians have shells, right? And like I remember
yeah,
someone was criticizing Russia for buying bullets from, getting bullets from North Korea. I'm thinking, why not? Like,
yeah,
why not? Why waste their own bullets when they could borrow, use some of North Korea's bullets, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
a lot of
logic.
people don't know. North Korea is a huge producer of armament. Like
Hmm.
they're one of the
Yeah,
largest exporters, one of the largest non-major power
yeah,
exporters in the world. People do not know that.
yeah.
There's this like I'm sure it sucks to live in North Korea.
Oh, it does.
That
Yeah.
does yeah. I do not want to be there.
It's literally the Hunger Games in North Korea, and their capital is like the capital.
Yep. But that doesn't mean they don't have an industry. You know, it's like when
Hmm.
Americans are like insulting China. Like, yes, I don't want to be in China. I don't like China at all.
Hmm.
But they still have like so many times more industry than
Well,
America.
here's the thing. For example, Ukraine is using Western weapons because Ukraine has run out of weapons, right? Russia is
Yeah,
using North Korean and Iranian weapons because they want to preserve their own weapons.
yeah.
Like
And
Russia is like basically like they have weapons, they're manufacturing a lot, but they don't really want to waste all of that in the field. Might as well use some of North Korea's ammo, some of their drones, first. Let them
yeah,
because
and like
yeah. Yeah, it makes
people
sense.
get
But
mad at
Ukraine has run
that.
out of all their resources. That's what they're using, only
Mhm.
Western technology now. And so far, Russians are destroying all that technology.
Yeah, and people would be like, "What? Why would they do that? Why wouldn't you do that? You know, if
Yeah.
if you have food in the freezer, get more food.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this
You
one
know,
guy goes, "Oh, Russia's using a North Korean ammo." I'm thinking, so what? Okay, what does that prove?
it can still kill you dead, and I don't want to be shot at with it. Like,
Yeah.
let's just add that to the list of things I don't want to be shot at with.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter whether it was Chang or Ivan who assembled the shell. It's
Yeah.
still going to blow you up, and you don't want that.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that Russians were only testing their North Korean drones, and they proved the test.
Well, it's the same with the Iranian ones.
Hmm.
The Iranians gave them a bunch of drones pro bono to test them to see what deficiencies they had, and people are like, "Oh, why would they do that? Because they're friends." Like it's a very
Yeah, yeah, and like again, like why not use their weapons first, test them out, and then
yeah,
before you use your own?
like cool free samples.
Yeah,
Let's see how these
exactly.
work. Like it doesn't take like much
Yeah,
mental gymnastics. There's a lot of mental gymnastics, but
yeah,
I mean, when Putin said this war would last for 5 years, potentially more, I was like,
yeah.
ugh,
Like
ugh.
I don't know, but by that time, I think NATO would just dissolve. It'd be like, we give up.
I
Yeah,
hope.
Ukraine, you're on your own.
I,
Goodbye.
I hope. I hope. And people are
Yeah,
gonna hate me for saying that, but like NATO's kind of, and this is not saying I like Russia or China. Let me specify that because people are going to be like, "Oh, you
yeah,
hate NATO, so you like Russia." No, I don't like NATO because they betrayed Rhodesia. I don't like
exactly.
NATO because they oppress European politics.
Oh,
I don't like
dude,
NATO
bro,
for a bunch of
dude,
reasons.
they're in the washer right now. Oh, dude, like, because I was wearing my Rhodesian shorts earlier today. I should,
Ah,
yeah, then
yeah,
the
I
washer would
love
have
those
shown.
things. I got a
Yeah,
pair too.
yeah.
Um, and like people, a lot of people, I don't know why, because a lot of them have been complaining about NATO before.
Hmm.
Why do I dislike NATO? It's very simple. And it's not even just that they betrayed Rhodesia and they oppress European
Oh, there's a lot
politics.
more. There's a lot more to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be as simple as NATO destabilizes Middle Eastern countries like Libya, who acted as a defense against sub-Saharan migrants, who are now completely destabilizing Europe and bringing all sorts of crime and
Hmm.
nastiness. Like,
Yeah, like NATO is an enemy to Europe. It's an enemy
yeah,
to Western Europe.
it's it's super simple. It's
Yeah,
really, really simple.
yeah. Well,
Um, it's not
yeah.
that deep, people.
So, guys, like we're running out of time right now, and I do appreciate you not a spy having this conversation or just a casual